Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Festival of Literature. It is with absolute delight and honor that I welcome my guest speaker, Dr. Shahd Alshammari. Dr. Shahd, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sabin, for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking to you.
I am equally, if not more, I think more excited having you with us. A little bit about Dr. Shahd. Dr. Shahd Al-Shamri is a Kuwaiti Palestinian author and academic. She is the author of Notes on the Flesh, Head Above Water, and Confetti and Ashes, which was recently published in 2025. Head Above Water was longlisted for the Barbellion Prize for Literature. She currently teaches literature and creative writing. So, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So, let's begin with the basics and your journey as an author and academic. How has it been? And I would love to know about Head Above Water to start with.
So I am an academic, but I'm also a writer. I live with multiple sclerosis, a chronic illness. It is often seen as an invisible disability. Not a lot of women write about the body, not a lot of women write about illness or the journey of illness or disability. And so my work as both an academic and an author has been invested in the idea of narrating the body. How do we tell the stories of our bodies? How do we tell the stories of aging with illness or without illness? How do women navigate the experience of being ill? Is there a very specific experience that women will go through? What about privilege? What about access to spaces that we live in? A lot of these questions are visited in my work. It started with the experience of writing Notes on the Flesh, which was a fictional collection of stories about both men and women with disabilities. And then I moved to Head Above Water, which was considered an illness narrative. So, Head Above Water, the subtitle is Reflections on Illness, and it narrates this journey of MS, of multiple sclerosis, of living with MS, but also working in academia with MS, with the cultural and societal expectations of what it means to be a teacher, what it means to be living amongst people and trying to perform more than anything success, perform ability, perform belonging and fitting in. The book was also quite successful. It was published by more than one publisher, one in the US and then one in the UK. It started with Neem Tree Press in the UK, Archana Sharma, and then it moved on to the US, and now it's being translated into Chinese actually. Out this year. And the idea, I think, that the reason that the book resonated with so many people was because we don't really get to hear the voice of women living in pain. Almost we shy away from the idea of women saying I am unwell, whatever that unwellness looks like, whether through mental health, physical health, or a disability. We still tend to look for the narrative that will be inspiring, the narrative that will uplift us, the protagonist who is strong and successful at the same time. And Head Above Water doesn't do any of that. It is what we call an interruption in narrative. So instead of accommodating the audience, it shakes you up. It makes you think about, do we have our own stereotypes? Do you even think about illness at all? Do you think about access if you don't live with a disability? When you enter a building, do you notice that there are escalators and elevators, or is it an architecturally inaccessible building? Or do you just go through life and not think about that? So that was Head Above Water. It had all of these questions And I was really reflecting on this idea of being ill in a patriarchal society, in a society that is not just patriarchal, but, with Western ideals of what it means to be an Arab woman, what it means to be living in this part of the world. Non-Western experiences of illness, they're very different from, of course, Western experiences of illness. So I was really kind of extending this argument with Head Above Water. And it did very well. More than anything, I think it was because it was very raw. The idea was, let's just say it as it is. The idea is to try and keep your head above water. Again, the saying, keep your head above water, stay strong, to swim through the current, the difficulties. But it doesn't mean that you will necessarily be successful. The idea is just to keep your head above water, not to drown in all of these expectations of culture and society. That's where the title really comes from. It's also very much about our thoughts. It's like a conversation between me and a student. It's very feminist, head above water. It has the solidarity between women's spaces. What happens when women support women? It becomes a very feminist space of solidarity, of safety, and it invites the reader to take part in these conversations. That was, I believe, the success of Head Above Water.
Wow. Um, a lot of things to mull over. And, I want to ask you, about the narrative of being ill in a patriarchal society. Because, uh, you know, and I may come from a place of privilege, but, uh, you know, uh, recently, you know, I've had issues of my own. So, you know, I think I can call
Relate.
myself, yeah, a
Yeah,
person with disabilities, with,
yeah,
visual impairment. And that's what I am trying to navigate as well. So,
yeah,
w- being ill in a patriarchal society where you are trying to keep your head above water, you are constantly reminded,
yeah,
and you don't need reminding because you're the one who's
yeah,
on that journey
yeah,
of pain, of getting used to the idea, no matter how long that illness has been. You,
yeah,
I feel, and that can just be my perception, that regardless of, it can be a decade or it can be 2 months, but you still, coming to terms. I don't know if we can really come to terms
absolutely.
with that. So how is it? How do you find being ill or having a disability in a patriarchal society, be it in the Middle East, be it in South Asia? Yeah.
So I think we can all almost agree that women are generally expected to be maternal, expected to become mothers and good mothers also, expected to be beautiful, to wear heels, to be able to walk in heels, to be able to look a certain way, and are actually expected to perform in a certain way. And this, of course, extends even into your work environment, into your workspace with your colleagues, how you look, how you behave, how you speak. So once illness enters the picture, then you are looking at first of all, a different physical look, whether that be you're unable to wear heels anymore, or you're using a wheelchair, or you're using a cane. So this question of are you feminine enough comes into play. Do you look feminine enough? Are you actually able to put the makeup on yourself? Are you wearing a certain beautiful dress that you are walking in almost flowing in? So all of these kind of angelic expectations of what it means to be a woman. And when we define femininity, often women with disabilities are kind of not even in that definition of what femininity can look like. The first thought that comes up for me, even in the media, if you look at let's say movies, Hollywood movies, Bollywood movies. Can you think of any movie where the protagonist was actually living with a disability, whether visual impairment or she was on a wheelchair and then she marries a non-disabled man? I don't recall seeing a movie like that. If anything, we started having some of these movies with the male protagonist being on a wheelchair, and then the female protagonist or the woman was the caretaker. Of course, the maternal, the sensitive one, the beautifully warm character who will accept whatever this male protagonist looks like and behaves like. But the other way around, that challenge is not there in the media. It's so hard to see in our films, in our movies, even in our music, in our musical videos. I don't see that anywhere. And because we don't see it, it becomes almost collectively, we can't anticipate what that looks like. So it's a shock once you can see that actually there's a woman who's actually living with a disability and she has a publishing house or she works as a teacher. That image doesn't seem to be even there. So we're quite shocked with it. What does that mean? And then we start thinking, does that mean she is inferior as a woman? Is she feminine enough? How do we define her? Is she seductive? Is she beautiful? Is she even somebody who is likely to be a wife and then a mother and then a partner and so on? Or are we just unable to see her as being able to perform maternal and feminine duties? So that's just, I think, all over the world, maybe more so in South Asia and the Arab world than most places. But it's still a question. I always pose the Hollywood question because I haven't seen these Hollywood movies that are Western narratives. It's so hard to see that. So that is how I think patriarchy plays into it. I remember having to once walk into campus with a cane and being told, that doesn't look good on you, as though the cane was an accessory, as though I was holding a bag and then trying to look a certain way. And, it was by a male colleague who didn't mean anything except a light joke. But if you look at the implications of that joke, I kept thinking about it. It doesn't look good. Is it supposed to look good because I'm a woman? And am I supposed to perform a certain look at all times? It's a lot to think about, as you said, Sabine. It makes us really think about what does that look like for us? And for anyone listening, I really invite you to try and imagine that. We see men in wheelchairs more often than not out and about. And even if you think about the Paralympics or you think about, again, movies, you can see that. It's there somehow in your collective unconscious. But when we think about women, it's a vague and almost dark area. We're not sure what does that look like. And does that mean we can still categorize her as feminine? Or is she immediately desexualized and we don't see her as that anymore? So all of these are questions that I continuously think about, whether in academic work or in Head Above Water and later on in other books. It's always a question of what happens when illness and disability enters the picture, even for us as women. Forget how the society looks at us or the patriarchal societies. Even us, we start to think about, shall I try to fit in? Shall I try to belong? Do I need to add a bit of makeup to hide the dark circles that are the result of chronic fatigue syndrome? Do I really need to push myself to wear those heels even though I'm limping anyway? So all of these questions of the performance of being feminine comes into play. And all of these questions are more questions than anything that have come to conclusions. I'm still really grappling with all of these questions.
Uh, you know, talking about performance, by putting on makeup, or uh, is it just, is it not just, but is it only performance? Because sometimes when you're doing it, you're trying to,
Feel happier.
feel happier as well.
Absolutely.
It's an attempt as well, you know. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because also when you think about these little things, for example, if you have tremors in your hand, it's almost impossible really to be able to put on the lipstick or to make sure that you've got the eyeliner correctly. It's hard enough to do it even without a tremor, right? So these things we don't really think about, but that comes into play when the body is incredibly affected. The body is in a state of shaking, whether Parkinson's or MS, or there's a tremor of some kind, or if there's a visual impairment, it's hard to get, the again, the artistic piece to look well. So there is a performance aspect, but I always think also about accessibility. Who gets to use these products? Whether not just affording these products, but also are you able to use them? And it's a lot of questions that comes up for me again about what it means to look in a feminine, to have this access also to all of these products. So it's something to really, I'm
So,
always asking myself that.
Shahad, you've touched, and this is one session, uh, I hope I can make it till the end because it's pretty emotional for me as well. And you're talking about tremors, and um, I love putting on makeup as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I've got, all these liners and lipsticks and all that, and they're all placed in one thing, and I'm unable
yeah,
to find them,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
picking up,
yeah,
and it's exasperating. Right now
yeah,
I feel emotional, but it
yeah,
really it you there's a rage inside. These
yeah,
are small, like you said, these are small things, and just picking up uh, an eye pencil and looking at the shade,
yeah,
and you're just guessing, right? And
yeah,
you're asking your kids or you're asking your husband, is this the right shade? Knowing that, and they're not being insensitive, but
yeah,
what shade I want is, I mean, they won't know, what I want to do. So
yeah,
it's this journey,
yeah, yeah.
and you're doing it for
It's
performance as well, right?
Of course. So again, it's there. It's really complicated because it does make you feel better and look better. But the same thing with, let's say, if I really enjoy yoga or playing a certain sport, but then that's taken away from me. And I think with illness that happens at a kind of a sudden time in your life, it's quite shocking because you're used to picking up the right lipstick or the right shade, or you're used to seeing it. You've always been in a place of access, in a place of privilege, of the body not failing you. But then all of a sudden we're in the state of the body has failed us. And I think that's why I keep calling for people to think about illness, because even aging itself, just simply aging without having a disability or an illness, you are bound to experience disability or illness just simply because of age at a certain point of your life. So the body is the vehicle that we come into the world with, this vehicle, but that vehicle can falter, it can change, it can crash. And then we start thinking about all these things only when it affects us directly. But the same goes for all sorts of privilege and all sorts of difficulties that people experience. We don't think about it unless we are put in that position. So that's why I call for people to read books that otherwise you would not pick up. I have so many readers who say, I don't want to read a book about illness or disability, it's too scary, it's too uncomfortable for me. The same way we if we would just not read about books about racism, or books about white privilege, or books about again sexism and all sorts of isms, are you just going to avoid that? You're likely to be put in that place of oppression at some point. And if you're a reader, then you want to experience all these different worlds. At the end of the day, reading is about being able to empathize and being able to put yourself in an experience you otherwise would not experience. But with illness and disability, again, you're more likely to experience that than all of a sudden, let's say, waking up as, as a brown person, or black, or Arab or Muslim. You're not just going to wake up and experience that. But you are likely to wake up one day, like you said, then your vision is impaired, or your hand doesn't work anymore, or something has gone wrong. So I really do hope that people can expand their horizons, and publishers too, and start thinking about works that do have disability as the center of the themes, or illness as the center of these themes, we still just talk about women as just a general category. Is there a woman protagonist in the book? Is there a strong woman protagonist in the book? But what about all these other stories? Where are they?
True, true. So, uh, we should stop thinking in binaries, feminine and not feminine. Um, I was having this discussion with a speculative fiction author, and they were saying, she was saying, Geeti Chandra, she was saying, you know, uh, most of the times the heroine in fiction who's going to save the world is this
Yeah.
teenager or
Yeah.
mid 20s, perfectly formed woman. Uh, so, can a teenager actually solve problems of the world? It would be a middle aged, maybe overweight woman,
Yeah.
you know, uh, who should be the real hero. So,
Yeah.
why are we thinking in binaries, and should we move uh, forward, or yeah? So my question is, why do we think
Yeah.
in binaries?
I think again because it's a very patriarchal way of thinking. It's always either or, and all of these feminist thinkers. I'm thinking of Helen Cixous, French philosopher and writer. The idea is to really challenge that thinking, and I think for us, as people who read, critics, thinkers, writers, readers, pause and reflect. I think we need to also challenge our own assumptions, even towards ourselves. When we think about ourselves, am I actually this or that? What about the gray area in between? For me, I started really thinking about the gray area once I realized that, living with MS, at this moment that you speak to me, I don't have a cane, I don't have a wheelchair, I'm able to see you and speak to you fluently. But there are days when there are relapses with MS. And in that case, then speech will be difficult, vision will not even be there, there will be a complete loss of one or two of the senses. Then that means that I can alternate between periods of disability and periods of ability. Not in ways that we can alternate, let's say, between genders or between a skin color or race, but with illness, you can. And again, that really helped me think about the gray area, challenging the binary thinking. I grew up, just like you, just like most people, with very binary thinking. I'm either this or that. I'm either a failure or I'm successful. I'm either whatever it is. And always this kind of thinking. I'm either good or bad. We grew up with these Disney tales that, we've only seen the evil stepmother and then you've seen the beautiful Snow White, or you've seen the beautiful Belle, but we haven't been able to see anything in between. And of course, when we think of aging, we also think that tends to be an evil stepmother. And a woman who's slightly older is most likely not going to be the heroine of the narrative. It has to be younger, ageism. It has to be somebody who's beautiful, somebody who's healthy, somebody who's very fit, and even unbelievably fit in a way that's not even rational. But we keep that in our subconscious. We keep that in our thoughts. Same thing with thinking about disability. Think about the characters in Disney that you know. I'm always reminded of, for example, in Lion King, Scar, right? Even the name of that character, Scar, he's scarred, he's evil. So, what happens with people with deformities, people with visible scars? Does that always mean they're associated with evil characteristics? And children grow up with that, and it's so hard to unpack. We're just talking about adults right now, but what happens with children, who are exposed to all of this thinking at a very early age? And we grow up as adults who think in binary terms.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Um, you mentioned Snow White, and there was this reel, a really funny reel. Uh, but if I kind of interpret it with this conversation, so the video was Snow White and the evil queen
Yeah,
having a conversation, right?
yeah,
And the evil queen starts with, or Snow White starts with, why are you trying to kill me. You are the queen. You are magnificent and you're beautiful. And who is telling you to do that? I'm just somebody who's living in a cottage with, these seven dwarves, and I'm, there's no competition. And she then
Absolutely.
asks, yeah, and she then asks, who's telling you all that? There's a mirror, and Snow White said, let me guess, is it a man? So we can substitute man with patriarchy,
Yeah, of
um,
course.
you know, and how what we're being taught, or what the narrative is being set. What do you? I mean, this is a weird thing that
No,
I'm.
no, no.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. I always love talking about Disney because it's like this universal aspect. We all, had access, or to watching these narratives, or at least heard of these narratives. It's kind of, these fairy tales are within our collective unconscious. And even if you think about, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? So disability is part of that, and these characters are called really interesting names: Grumpy and Lazy and Dopey, and all of these names. But again, you also start to think about, people with disabilities as connected to these very specific stereotypes. And of course, with Snow White, also, this woman against women, and like you said, it is the patriarchy that puts us as competitors, and not as a feminist solidarity. In order for us to arrive at that space, we need to do a lot of work, and you do it in your amazing work in your festival, and the women that you support, the writers, the readers. I try to do it in my writing, my teaching space. It's this activism doesn't have to look the same for everyone, but we're consciously always trying to do that. And that, I think, is how we challenge these spaces more than anything.
So coming over to your, confetti and ashes, uh, reflections on wellness. So tell me a little bit about it.
Love the question really talks about, the title is Confetti and Ashes, binary thinking. Just to kind of go with your thinking, we tend to think about everything as either confetti, worth celebrating, a life that is actually a happy life, and ashes, a life that is filled with death, losses, and struggling. And I really wanted to really think about how these two are actually constantly in conversation: confetti and ashes. And my personal experience has been about both, and navigating those very different emotions. Like you said, one day you really want to look your best, but you're not able to, so the confetti is gone from that moment, and then you're stuck with the ashes. And then the other day, you're back to feeling like, okay, actually, life is worth celebrating. I can find celebratory moments, very small moments, or very small victories amongst the ashes or within those losses. And that was the idea of confetti and ashes. I was always asked a question in interviews and by readers: how do you live a good life? Do you think that people with disability or people with illnesses, myself included, do you live a good life? And then I started thinking, how do we even begin to define that? Even when I ask you, are you happy, with your life, or where you're currently at, what you've done over the past 10, 15, 20 years, are you satisfied? It's such a big question. And that's why I decided this is the book, Reflections on Wellness Rather Than Illness, because people were asking me more about being happy, being healthy, being well, rather than thinking about illness and disability. So Confetti and Ashes follows through almost like a sequel, but not exactly a sequel. It challenges even my own definitions of illness and disability. When I wrote Confetti and Ashes, I had really changed a lot of my own thinking and head above water. I started challenging even my own experiences of how I look at life, because we change all the time and we grow all the time, and that really bothers people when we do begin to change our thinking. So I was challenging my own notions of what does disability look like for me? What does it look like as what does success look like as a teacher, as an academic? Do I need to put in so many hours? Do I need to, constantly try to prove and validate myself for society, cultural expectations? What can I actually celebrate in the illness, or what can I celebrate in the pain? Or is it too positive, and then you get people on social media saying, oh, that is just toxic positivity and it will get us actually struggling even more. And my response in Confetti and Ashes is we need to find again that gray area, that space, almost like a third space, like a critical place where we can belong, where we can actually belong. Just like, for example, you having the festival online, right? Or recording these, it is accessible to someone who can't fly over, somebody who won't be able to be there, but you haven't canceled the festival. You're finding ways around it. And that for me is that third space, that area where we can all actually have space, we can belong, we can be invited. And we can also invite our listeners to really think about that. What is your third space? What is the place outside of the binary thinking? Where can we exist? And can we create it if it's not there? And that's what Confetti and Ashes does. I'm constantly thinking, what does it mean to live a good life? Am I allowed to undo my past self? Let's say my depressed self, my unhappy self? Can I recreate my narrative? Can I rewrite my story? And for a lot of people, even readers, they challenged me. They said you were positioning yourself as, a disabled writer. Today, I'm trying to not to kind of challenge that. Yes, a disabled writer, but that's not it only. There's a lot more there. Confetti and Ashes also talks about movement, about sports for women. What does it mean for women to participate in sports? Does it mean you have to be incredibly healthy and fit to be able to be invited into the sports arena in order for you to actually take up space? So the question of space is really throughout Confetti and Ashes: physical space, mental space. I'm also looking at how the writer Virginia Woolf says you need a room of your own if you're going to write as a woman. Did she mean an actual room, a physical room? What about, is this room accessible to everyone? Do I need a caretaker in that room? Am I going to be able to be really alone with my thoughts and happily so? Or am I going to be isolated in my room? So all of these questions are in Confetti and Ashes. It's a book that is going to be published very soon, also in South Asia. I'd love to just say that there's going to be a South Asian edition, and I'm very excited about that because I believe, especially women in South Asia, readers in South Asia, there's a lot of overlap in this narrative and the experiences of navigating society. In the book, I talk about the sport squash, which is a sport, often reserved for men, really. But in my experience, moving into sports or playing squash at a much older age with disability has proven to really be helpful, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. And I'm looking at how movement can affect our sense of wellness, our sense of confidence, even if it's basic kind of movement. You don't have to, go to the Olympics. But the idea is that kind of thinking challenged my beliefs, even of what can I do as somebody living with illness or disability. Am I allowed to take up space in the squash court? Am I allowed to play a sport that's often reserved for men? All of these questions are in Confetti and Ashes.
Wow. And before I ask you to read, um, I wanted to ask, what do you think is wellness? Because uh, again, now the way I see it uh, is, darkness can also be part of wellness, you know,
Absolutely.
um, and you can look perfect one day, and you can look more than just imperfect in the material, visual sense. And And maybe we would be okay with that. But again, uh, the environment, that you live
It's
in,
not. Yeah.
you know, that is that basically challenges your mental health as well. So, what do you think entails wellness?
It's a really good question. I ended up having to write an entire book about it because it was the question that I was asking myself, do you live a good life, Shahd? I was asking myself all the time, what does it mean for me to be happy and then sad many days, of the year, and only happy some days of the year, healthy some days of the year. And I think for me, I finally arrived at one conclusion. And of course, people can arrive at different conclusions, but I have to have a toolkit. I have to have a little box, just like, having your little makeup bag where you have the things that you love in it to make you feel better, look better. So I have to have my toolkit. Within that is the things that I love. So I have my books with that can carry me throughout my illness, throughout my darkness. I have some friends that are there for me to reach out for a cup of coffee. I have a sport that I love. I have some meditation. I've got some yoga. I've got a bit of everything that goes into this toolkit, and they can be really big things and they can be small things, but they help me stay head above water, and they help me stay well to a certain extent. Sometimes I need an extra dose of friendship, so I'll see two friends in that week. Or sometimes I'll need an extra dose of meditation. I'll meditate 3 times in that week. Again, it doesn't work for everyone. Maybe some people find that meditation is not their thing, but then, for example, boxing is, and that's fine. But the idea is you need to have that toolkit. I think I started learning much later on in life that I need to have a toolkit, and also you can take things out of that toolkit and remove them, and find something else that really works. Even friends, change them. Find something that actually works for you in this given period of your life. Even when we change, you might find you have, let's say, more, let's say, if there is an illness or a disability, you might make friends with people who actually live with similar experiences when previously you didn't. If you go through retirement, you have more friends who are actually retired than the other way around. If you're a business owner or publisher, you probably have publisher friends, which you previously might not have had in your toolkit. So for me, wellness is really just having that toolkit and being able to label whatever is inside it, but also being adaptable to say that doesn't work anymore, doesn't make me feel good, that needs to go, and I need to replace it with something else.
In my toolkit is this festival, by the way. That,
Yes.
yeah, people
I
have
think for a lot
told,
of people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. People have said, this is one expensive, uh, uh, you know, uh, I told them that, that this is something I feel that I'm doing all for myself. And they,
Yeah.
and they're saying, it's too expensive in the sense that, because you work hard and, there's time and effort. So, yeah, but, you know, with conversations like these, I think it's really important uh, to have this space where, well, we can vent and we can have dialogue and whatnot.
Absolutely. And it's an investment, right? So, yes, it is expensive, but just like all good things, right?
Yeah,
So, again, even if I'm going to book a meditation class or a sports class, or I'm going to travel, even I'm going to have a good, kind of meal, I'm going to be investing. But there is that sense that's, of course, quite rewarding for whatever it is. And I think that's the question. Do we do things for ourselves, and do we do things for others? Women tend to do things for others all the time, but it's so hard for us to come to that point in life where you say, it's okay, maybe I'm doing the festival not just for others, but also for me. Or maybe
yeah,
I'm writing this book not just for readers, but also for me. And kind of just remove that shaming or that guilt. And I think that is a big part of the process of our wellness, so to say.
true, true. If you could read, something from your book, that would be amazing.
I would be really excited to. So, this is just the first few pages of Confetti and Ashes, and the chapter is called The Memoirist's Chatter. An icebreaker is meant to make you more comfortable, but can be incredibly awkward to initiate. I start this book with a conviction that I will always make both myself and the reader uncomfortable in order to arrive at a place of comfort. A memoirist, that was the label I was granted by book reviewers and publishers. How was I a memoirist when my brain was eternally on fire? Irony is my favorite word because there are so many types of irony: verbal, dramatic, and situational. I was surprised after having written a book about my illness that I would become infected with a strange desire to listen to people and to write again. But I had prayed for that book to be contagious. I just didn't think it would happen. Sometimes I wish I didn't write a book about my body, my illness, my struggles, me this, me that. Everyone who read the book asked, "Is it all real?" When I nodded, they would look at me, stare at me. It was never enough to just nod. They always wanted to push for more, their eyes asking for more details and exposure. I had crossed into an unknown territory, and here I was trying to navigate the aftermath of exposure. As a disabled author, people wanted to know, does it really hurt that bad? They wanted to see if I could let them in closer and closer. It was like I was constantly haunted by more questions. The media, the interviews, the book reviews. It was all too much. But a good memoirist bears their soul, they tell you. Funny, it's a soul that we consider, but we still shy away from the body. I had written about the body, my body. Yes, I need to correct myself, not the body. But because when you live with a disability, the body is what preoccupies your thoughts. It's you. There is no mind body dichotomy anymore. There is no room for all the theories about the body. You can't theorize when you're hurting. The body in its messiness and vulnerability, but mostly in its presence, its silence. It reminds you you're still here. Everything that we are starts from and ends with the body. We're assigned genders at birth, given names that we can pronounce or not, and finally learn to walk more than once in the few decades we are here. We also learn how to sleep and fall asleep crying. We learn to sleep to avoid crying, and finally succumb to our final sleep before waking up again to a new existence, which again depends on your beliefs. The body is our connection to words and their sounds, rhythm and their feel. We experience the world through our bodies, and our bodies are poems themselves. The body is intricately done and tightly woven together, with cells running into each other and delaying transmissions. It is stanza like, with lines breaking away and colliding with each other. And I loved poetry before I ever began writing. Poetry was the lifeline. It felt lighter than prose, heavier than pages and pages of words, extended to meet a word count imposed by a publisher. So it was less wanted, less desirable. Poetry was a constant game, words that danced on the page to a rhythm that I felt my life had lost. Poetry was free, the way that bodies were not free. Yet it knew the beats of all music and could pick up the pace easily. It didn't mess up, it didn't falter like I did. I wrote poetry when I wanted to hide my body, but also when I wanted to free it. Perhaps at the end of the day, this is what disillusionment looks like. We think we know better. We think we can envision the life we want. But what happens when life decides for you? What happens when you reach a stage where you must submit to the unknown? The unknown, the forces that must be reckoned with. I am tired of authors. I'm tired of myself speaking. I'm exhausted from what publishers want to hear, the edits, the demands, and the constant claims of being inclusive. If they were really so inclusive, why the constant reminders of how important inclusivity is? They ask me if my book can speak for itself. How can the book speak if the readers scream, squeal, and slash it whenever they want through various platforms and social media? What makes a work sell is not the author. What makes a work sell is the reader. And what kills a story is the reader who finds it gaps and inconsistencies. What kills a story before it leaves the womb is an agent's attack. Who is the story for? Why should we approve? Why should we publish a story? And how much will it sell? It is as though publishing is a path of permission: permission to speak, permission to be heard, and permission to exist among the elite. Am I still searching for Daddy Shakespeare's validation? I want to run far away from him. In this book, I speak the way I'm learning to speak now. I'm unlearning speech patterns and cutting ties with authorship as a respected and esteemed entity. Speech is always chaotic and never really clearly clear. If you listen hard enough, there's always at least two people speaking. I use my voice in this narrative, but recognize it is no longer just mine. And I hope that you, dear reader, will grant us your body as a witness to these conversations. I'm just here to testify. I think I'll end at this point. Confetti and Ashes.
When I read that, Shahad, I loved it.
I'm
And I'm
so
so
happy.
glad you chose, this to read. Um, One thing, you know, you were talking about poetry, and one of my favorite novellas that I'm always quoting is The Metamorphosis by Kafka.
Yeah,
And in the end, Samsa, uh, you know, he's metamorphosed into this bug,
yeah,
the body, right?
yeah,
We're talking
yeah.
about the body.
Amazing. Yeah,
And when he hears the violin in the end played by his sister, you know, it gives him solace, and that's the point when he passes away.
yeah,
And then his body is thrown.
yeah.
So, uh, you know, your words reminded me of that.
Yeah, it's, I think, to reach that state, there has to be a certain death and then a rebirth. And that's always my question, are you really rebirthing your own self? And how does that actually work for you? How do we go from illness to wellness? How do we, use a sense of metamorphosis on a daily basis? Are we doing it, or are we afraid of doing it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Any last words?
I just love your festival so much. So I hope that people will continue to listen and read. And I love that it, allows all sorts of voices to enter the conversation. It really is accessible and accommodating. And I think we need more of that. So I hope it inspires publishers and editors and people with power, really. If you do have that sense of power, that authority, that agency, invite more people. Let us, really, put our hands together and work together to be more accommodating, to be more inclusive, and not just as big words and theory, but really that's the kind of activism that we're looking in for.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think in every landscape and in every sphere, I think we need to go beyond the binary, you know, uh, because I think inclusivity is about, it's about that, that gray area, that uh, area which, maybe people are shy to explore or navigate, or they're afraid, or taking that leap of faith, because I think that that's what's needed in this world as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, where we're headed in this world, there's going to be a lot of more binaries, human and robot and human and AI. So what happens in between? This is the question, I think. And if we open ourselves up for that possibility, it really does become endless. So I hope people will take something from this conversation and just really think about, where do we go from here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shahad, for
Thank you.
this uh, interesting and meaningful conversation. Thank you for participating, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.